My name is John Eberhardt, and this is a Veterans Project. And with me today is Ron Davie. Ron, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're going to go through your career with the United States Navy. Let's start where all stories begin. And you were born in Kearney,
well, I was born in Jersey City, Margaret Haig Hospital, but I grew up in Kearney, New Jersey.
And you went to school in Kearney?
Yes, Emerson Grammar, Lincoln Junior, and Kearney High School.
Okay. So after high school, you didn't go directly into the service. You pursued a couple of, actually some interesting paths. You went to school?
Yes, I had a full-time job at RCA in Harrison. I went to school 3 nights a week at Seton Hall University, and I was also playing in a rock and roll band.
So you were in a rock and roll band? Okay.
Yes, yes, the Loafers.
Oh, that's the name of the band. A little plug there for the Loafers.
Of course, of course.
Now, during this time, and this was in the early 60s?
It was from 59 to 61.
Okay, so things were heating up down in Vietnam. It was pre-Cuban Missile Crisis. So these were troubling times for the United States.
The Cold War was the biggest, and of course, Nam had started. The advisors were going there more and more every year. So starting from like 60, 61 on, yeah.
But you were okay from the draft. You had 2S classification because of college.
No, no. I was only taking 9 credits instead of 12, so I was not draft exempt. However, most of the guys in the band, for instance, we were talking about it, you know, in the summer of '60, and first went with the sax player. He joined the Navy, and a couple, 3 months after that, the drummer joined the Marines. In February, I went into the Navy, and the lead guitar, about 4 weeks after me, joined the Air Force. Needless to say, the band was now defunct.
Wow, the band covered just about every branch of service, with the exception of the Coast Guard.
Well, I wanted to have a choice of where I wanted to go, the branch of service versus, you know, the other branches.
Understood. Yeah, because if it was a draft, you were going to the United States Army. There was no two ways about it.
Right, right. So I didn't want to march, didn't want to shoot guns, so the Army and Marines were out. Navy gave us a service-wide test when you wanted to advance in rate, whereas at the time, the other branches of service, if your sergeant didn't like you, you weren't going to go very far in the beginning. So I figure I'd take my chances on the service-wide test.
That was good thinking. So it's really competition rather than personalities. It's basically with the Navy.
Right,
yeah.
You know.
Excellent. Yeah, and you enlisted where? What town?
I had enlisted in Newark. That was on 1060 Broad Street. I had taken some time off work, went to a recruiter one time, sounded good, so I went back. And February 21st, I took the world-famous oath. Okay. And then then they flew us out of McGuire, and we went to Great Lakes Naval Training Center.
In February? In
February, one of the non-brilliant moves of my life.
Perfect time to be in Great Lakes.
Oh, yes, yes. Wind chill factors were always around 10.
A few of the memories you had in boot camp, some of the things, for instance, some of the drills that you went through, and we were talking about manual of arms and that M1 rifle, which is a huge, heavy rifle. Right.
Well, we drilled with the old Springfields, and they were even heavier. You know, there's qualification, obviously. But the Navy, being the Navy, always stressed cleanliness too. So you washed your own clothes, and I'm not sure how many of the other branches did that, but we always had to do that. And you hung them up with these little 6-inch pennants, these little ties, and cloth ties, which you also had to wash. And they had to be even at the end, and square knots, and everything got hung out to dry.
No clothespins?
No, no. Yeah, hung them out all on square knots, and then hung them out to dry, and they froze in February and March.
I'm sure they did.
So, and then the basic training that everybody goes through.
Now, when you washed the clothes, you had a machine
Well, yeah.
some sort.
Yeah, you had a Kai brush, what they call it, a scrub brush, and you had some soap.
And a sink.
And a sink. Yeah, the sink, and you wash them.
You wash your clothes
and you rinse them. Same sink, multitasking. Then you hung them out.
To freeze.
In February and March, there were times it did freeze, yeah.
And besides your clothes, I mean, it was a matter of, because of close quarters, of personal hygiene.
Oh, sure, sure. I mean, when you're in the barrack, when you're on a ship especially, I mean, getting down later, but when you're on a ship, your head ends, for instance, here, and the other guy's feet are here. So when you have less than 12 inches between head and feet, you better make sure he's taking his showers on a regular basis.
Exactly. So after basic training, well, in basic training, they send you to school, or they do some testing to see what type of schooling.
Yeah, a lot of different testing. Eyesight, hearing helped me because one of the hearing tests that I went through, evidently I did pretty good at it. And further on in training, you sit down with, I guess, the equivalent of a counselor, and they go over the battery of testing that you took and suggest what rate or what you should strike for, what they call going in. And he suggested communications to me, and I thought that was a pretty good idea because I'd worked at RCA, and maybe I'd have a job to go to when I come back, communication. Never realizing at the time what kind of communications I was going to get into.
Right, you're thinking more like disc jockey with your band and stuff like that. But your thought process it was great. You decided to go in the Navy because of advancements, seemed much more logical, right, and fairer. And now you're looking at communications now because you're seeing life after the Navy.
Yes.
So that was
just in case it didn't work out.
For a young recruit, that's excellent.
Well, either that or a lucky guess.
So you decided on, and maybe we should mention that there's a difference between rank and rate. Rank is your echelon in the service branch. For instance, like private, corporal, sergeant, for lack of a better word, seaman apprentice, petty officer. And your rate is your actual function. Yes,
that's the job. Or I think the other branches use MOS, that type of thing.
So so you're great to do this communication. They think your hearing is superb, all ready for this. So now they send you off to A school and
Pensacola, Florida. Big change from Great Lakes.
Big change.
A welcome change, I might add.
So that was part. I'm sure when you knew that Pensacola was your training base, that had to be part of your thought process.
Right. Well, sure. Why not? Okay. That was one of the first Corey Field, which is an old World War II training field. That's where that base started, and I was in one of the first 6 or 7 classes down there. And by the time I got out, there was over 4,000 people in that field. Wow. They had all brand new barracks, air conditioning, and all the good things that we didn't have.
Nice. So you studied, what exactly did you learn while you were there?
Well, in the beginning, we trained in Morse code. All right, we learned how to take Morse code on an Underwood typewriter and had the earphones over your head, and learned how to gradually take down code at a pretty high rate of speed.
Yeah, I was going to say, those dots and dashes coming very quickly.
Extremely, and especially when they had speed keys, that made it even faster. So I would say we were doing between 40 and 60 words a minute,
That's fast.
Yeah.
That's fast for typing.
Yeah. And then after that, it was, once you finish with that, we went into an advanced training session, which at the time I was going through that training, what I didn't know was that the forms that you fill out, the FBI was undergoing a security training, okay, in my neighborhood at home. So that was a little, my parents were born and raised in Scotland, and it was kind of, they became citizens right away.
Okay.
But it was kind of a little shock when people are going around the neighborhood and their neighbors are coming up. Did Ron do anything? What happened to Ron?
Thinking the worst, sure.
Yeah, so I was a tad mischievous in the day too, so maybe that was part of it. So they were, some of the letters, what did you do, or what's going on? And I just says, well, it's just a routine security clearance. In effect, it wasn't routine. It was pretty thorough.
High level they were looking at.
Yes, because the next part of training, when we walked into the same classroom and the Underwood typewriters were covered, when they finally allowed us to uncover them and start the second phase of the training, you look down and instead of the American US English alphabet, it was part of the keys were, all of the keys were in Cyrillic. It was Russian alphabet.
Well, so there's a hint. Now, I just want to go back just real quickly to the security clearance, because it's got to be frightening. I mean, your parents are at home, somebody flips open this badge, FBI, it's like...
Well, they weren't talking to them per se. They were talking to the neighbors and people I worked with and everything.
Your parents have been in this country for quite a while.
Yeah, my dad came over in 26, 27. Mom came over in 28. They both became citizens within 5 years and lost their accents immediately.
You say that with a...
Oh.
Look, they lost their accents?
Well, according to my mother, she did. When I was in high school, we used to meet on the stoop, you know, because they were all multifamily dwellings. And she was on her way to work, giving me last-minute instructions before I went to work after school, which I did for all 4 years. And the girls would say, "Mrs. Davie, I just love your accent." And my mom, rest her soul, she'd just look at the girls and say, "Young lady, let me explain something to you. I came to this country in 1928. I became a United States citizen in 1933. I do not have an accent."
Oh, that's precious.
Oh, and the girls would look at me, and of course, being the coward that I was, I rolled them like every teenage guy would.
Don't laugh at Mom, no.
And then she'd end it also, and then she'd just say, "By the way, his Aunt Jean, now she has an accent, I don't." So that was just part of it.
That is
yes.
funny.
But when you, getting back to the clearance, sure,
the typewriter.
all the people in the neighborhood were obviously, you know, concerned because nobody in the neighborhood ever gone through, you know, that type of background check, big background check.
Yeah, that's something.
And then when you open, as I said, the second phase of the training, and it's the Russian alphabet, then it sort of dawns on you that, you know, all of us, not just me.
This is high-level security.
This is big time. The security clearance actually was top secret cryptographic, which we found out a little bit later. But that was the second phase of my training in Pensacola. And they did a lot more tricks, if you will. So you had to be a lot more alert on, and speeds increased rapidly.
Okay, so they're getting you up and up and up and
up
and up.
Definitely, because a lot of the operators over there were female soldiers. And not to sound sexist, but they had a lot lighter touch on the keyboard, and especially the speed keys. So they went a heck of a lot faster than the males did.
Sure, makes sense.
So,
makes sense.
Can't believe I just brought that up out for all these years.
Wow, no, that makes perfect sense, though.
Oh, yeah.
Lighter touch, you'd be a lot faster.
Not fun for us.
No, I can imagine. Now, that's not the end of your training.
No. After Pensacola, we went to a training center, an Air Force training center, because the Navy had just shut down Treasure Island, and the new training facility that was going to become part of Pensacola hadn't been built yet. So we went to an Air Force base, and we went along with Air Force, similar fields that we were in. Air Force Security Service was at a Keesler Air Base in Mississippi.
Okay.
But the non-Morse intercept, which I was going into at the time, the non-Morse signals, that was in scenic San Angelo, Texas, which actually was a very nice town.
Now,
but
that sounds interesting, the non-Morse.
Right.
So that's something other than dot dash.
Yes, big difference.
Okay.
Big difference. And we learned to monitor and identify different types of signals. And it was mostly Russians that we were interested in because the Cold War was huge at the time. You know, the advisors were coming in.
Yeah.
And it was tense, to say the least, in those days. So we were learning all the various Russian signals that we would learn to intercept.
Okay.
And if possible, break them down by boards, what they call boards, and translate them and decipher them. I
Okay.
guess decipher would be a better word.
So now you're fully trained in something other than dots and dashes, something which is, you've got to be proud but concerned of it. You know, you're pretty up there on the security level. Now they're going to put your talents to work.
Yes. And I was ordered to Naval Communications Station in Sidi Aia, Morocco, which was different from Pensacola in Texas.
Right at the tip of the Atlantic there.
Yeah, right on the western side of Morocco. Kenitra was the larger naval base, and we were inside about 22, 23 miles inside. And we had a separate, there was a separate communication station, a separate direction finding station, which was
wow.
correlating.
Direction finding also, so you're
Well, you had to
figuring out where these are coming from.
Yeah, you not only had to intercept them, you had to find out who was sending them and where they were going,
Who's
if
receiving,
possible.
Yeah.
You know, these were the days before the satellites. Everything was ground-based. There was a lot of communication stations in the European area. So when you filled out the world-famous dream sheet when you're in training, they said, where would you like to go? So everybody does it. So you put Kamasaya, Japan, Etzel, Scotland, I put, and Kiel, Germany, because I was close to German-Danish border, and I thought that would be interesting.
So you end up in Morocco.
Oh, yeah. So whatever you put on your dream sheet,
That goes out the window.
no, it's not a shot. Not a
Exactly.
shot. I mean, I really don't know many people that it ever worked for. Definitely didn't work for me. Culture shock, Presbyterian kid, 19 years old, all of a sudden is in Morocco. But it was an interesting country, I will admit that.
So now, 1962, something happened that was fairly interesting. As you were doing your job, listening in on radio calls
Well,
back and forth.
Yes, basically I didn't have set frequencies to monitor. You know, we had certain guys that would rove through different frequencies, looking for certain types of these signals, especially the ones, the special ones, the ones, for instance, the standards were the 121Ds, the 121Bs, et cetera, but there was a 1A3BS that the Russians had that was, we couldn't break that on the base, but maybe the boys in NAVSEC group, Naval Security Group over
Send it on.
in Maryland could. So it was April, May, and I was on a mid-watch, just started the mid-watch, and I noticed something that was really unusual, and I heard it. And per instructions, just like we were trained to do, the first thing I did was I locked on, got the best possible signal, and I turned on the high-speed tapes, because we were supposed to do that first. So I turned on the tapes and had that going. And the next thing that you're trained to do, everybody, not just me, but you get a fix, find out where it is.
Okay.
So I called down to DF, and my buddy Ski was on that night, and I said, I gave him the frequency, and he tracked it, and he got back, and I'm looking on him on a small map a global map that I had. That's strange. It was totally unusual, you know, the direction, the bearings.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So it wasn't anything that I'd been familiar with, and then again, I'm still a rookie. I'm only there two and a half, 3 months. So I said, "You want to do that for me again, please?" So he comes back to me and he says, "I don't think this is right, because according to the fixes you gave me, that's between Moscow and Havana." And all of a sudden I stopped and I saw Havana, and I go, "Wow, I knew the revolution." You know, all of us, you know, and all of a sudden this is 3 years after the revolution. I said, wow. So, you know, I just kept taping it, and when the tape got down to about an inch, you know, you threw another tape in, like a backup. And I knew it was hot because within 45 minutes of me telling my supervisor, second class, Richie Wilk, I says, I have something really strange here, and I think it's hot. So he agreed, and we had the head of the ComStay down there. The old man, the captain, came down.
Ooh, okay.
And of course,
Then this is important.
well, I didn't even know if he had a clearance. That's the first thing I asked.
Oh, really? The captain?
Yeah, well,
That's
I
true.
mean,
He may not have, yeah.
you know. So within, I think at around somewhere between 0400, 0415 in the morning, the first 2 or 3 tapes were on their way to Naval Security Group down in Fort Meade, Maryland, by jet. So because of the time differential, you know, there's 6 hours, because we were on Greenwich Mean.
Right.
So we were, yeah, between the time situation, they were probably there at Fort Meade in NSA at like 6:30 in the morning.
So in 1962, you got this first, obviously one of the first transmits between Moscow and Havana.
Well, we definitely think it was, and not only us, we had heard through the grapevine, you know, scuttlebutt as we used to say, that there were 6 or 7 stations, communication stations throughout Europe, all did the same thing within a 12 to 15 minute period.
Wow.
Which is great.
That is, yeah, that just verifies.
You know,
yes.
that was bases in Turkey, bases in Cyprus, I think Naples, Edsel, Scotland, Kiel, and there was another one in Germany. I think it was an Air Force.
So there's some guy in Scotland that should have been Ron Davie. So yeah, that's exciting.
But 6 months later, you know, that's when it really hits you.
That's, yeah, sure.
You know, because all of a sudden, you know, the blockade is declared.
President Kennedy is, yes.
Declares the blockade, and then you really start thinking back and say, wow, was I first?
Was that the key in the door?
Was it? Or, you know, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Maybe they already had, you know, Air Force, you know, U-2s flying over, and they knew. But
or
I
maybe
don't know if
the
the freighters.
U-2s to
I don't
fly.
know if the freighters. Never found out if the freighters with the missiles, which had to go through, you know, the
Straight to
Med.
Baltic, yeah.
You know, I don't believe they had started at that time, but you know, that's history, and that's, you know, archived someplace.
Well, you probably would have picked them up going through the straits.
Well, we wouldn't have probably visual contacts. We weren't even close to.
No, but I mean radio contacts, radio transmissions from the
Well, the
ships.
Diddy guys would have done that. The vessels didn't usually transmit, you know, non-Morse.
Okay, so you have some excitement in Morocco,
That was different. Yeah.
and now it's time to do what all sailors do, and that's to board a ship.
Yes. August, left Morocco a little early, because technically my rate, you're supposed to send 2 tours overseas, 1 tour home. So my first year was all schooling. So 18 months in Morocco, so 18 months was going to be scheduled to another overseas duty station, we thought at the time, because there was only one of these particular vessels out, and the vessel I'm talking about was the Oxford. That was the first, quote, spy ship. The Georgetown, my ship, was the second. And I went into pre-commissioning training in August of '63. And pre-com is the whole series what everybody on the ship has to do. You go through fire training, you go through drills, battle stations, we repelled boarders. I was on the repelled boarders because I had qualified in Morocco to shoot, you know, rifle and a .45, and I was one of the few people. I mean, we
Well,
were.
for third-class petty officer, you had to qualify in the 45, if I recall.
Yeah, I had made third.
I think I may go in the wrong direction on this one.
I had made third in Morocco. I'm pretty sure I did.
And you eventually left as second-class petty officer. I wanted to get that out real quick. So then you went on a shakedown cruise to, everybody calls it Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay.
Right.
This way they shake down whatever's wrong with the vessel and check your efficiency, how well you guys operate at sea. But you have an interesting story about, actually several interesting stories, but one of them was the, something about there's a drill that the Navy has where during the shakedown where it's a man overboard drill, and there's a poor gentleman who's nicknamed Oscar.
Right. Well, that's the code. You know, Abel, Baker, Charlie, Delta. You know, it's
So if you could just explain to us that
basically Oscar.
what happened to this poor Oscar.
Oscar. Okay. Oscar is the dummy that they throw overboard, and it's not a human being. Basically, it's in the Navy. They tie up people. They stuff dungarees, and they stuff the dungaree pants with K-POC material, which was at the time what they used to manufacture the life jackets. There was old material for the life jackets. So this whole material is stuffed inside a shirt, inside the pants. They tie an orange, fluorescent orange helmet on it. They put fluorescent gloves and fluorescent socks or whatever on. So it's kind of bright, so it can be recognized at sea. So thankfully, this didn't happen during shakedown. This was like after. But it was our second little 12-week cruise off of Cuba. But we were going to do a man overboard drill during these relatively calm seas, 2 to 3 feet, which is what we used to consider glass.
Yeah, a lake.
So they called man overboard drill, and the crew went out, and some went to the davits and lowered the lifeboats, some boarded the lifeboats, and they had thrown Oscar overboard that floated, allegedly. So they threw him somewhere between midships and a fantail, and off he went, and the crew would get Oscar, see him bobbing around with his bright orange helmet and everything, and as soon, the clock started as soon as the man overboard was sounded. And the drill was how fast can you get and locate and bring him to safety on the boat that chased him within X amount of time. And that's when the stopwatch stops. Our stopwatch never stopped.
It's still ticking today.
Today. If it's a Timex, takes a look and keeps on. They never found Oscar, which meant that a lot of guys on the ship didn't go too close to the rail for a while. Because we all figure, well, if they can't find something that floats, how the hell are they going to find me that can't float?
Who was most likely not wearing an orange helmet, not have orange gloves on.
Yeah, so that was a little humorous anecdote about.
And there's also one about I don't know if it was on this cruise or another cruise, but obviously there was harassment going on in the seas between the Soviet Union and the United States. There's a story about a small airplane, a Piper Cub, or some sort of surveillance plane.
We had a boiler problem, and we were like inside Cuban waters.
Okay. And that's why you said boiler problem with a, okay.
Yeah. And it was May Day of '64. I happen to remember because I was looking through the long glass at Havana, and there was like an 8 or 9 story picture of Fidel on this office building. We were a tad inside their waters.
If you're seeing this, yes, you are.
Yes, we were. And basically what happened, the PT boats and the little destroyer escorts, et cetera, that we had given the Batista government before the revolution in the 50s, were now circling the Georgetown. And I was on repelled waters, and I was the watch. I had my watch section. I was in charge of like 6 or 7 guys, very good guys, by the way, excellent at their job. But in this particular occasion, I'm out there with, I think, a .45 or something like that. I mean, we had no guns, we had no weapons. And there was this annoying Piper Cub that kept circling our ship. And I mean, it was tense, and we had no place to hide. I mean, we were on the deck at the O2 level, and all it was a little chain.
In their water.
In their water, behind a mast that was like 6 or 8 feet at the base, because it was top loaded with all the electronic equipment we carried on the ship. And then this annoying Piper Cub obviously was taking newsreel. I mean, because they had the film with the camera with the big tube. So we decided to give him something to look at in 6 o'clock news. Allegedly, somebody on that particular O2 level gathered his troops, his guys, all unarmed. So we gathered them behind the base of the mast where no one could see us from the bridge, because that would obviously have been big-time disciplinary action. And as the Piper Cub made one of his passes, we just dropped our drawers and mooned them. And that was probably an interesting, probably made the highlight on the 6 o'clock news.
Which is probably good you did it behind the mast so the captain couldn't see.
Oh, without a doubt. Nobody saw us.
Now, one other interesting thing I did want to touch on, is just briefly, was there's something in the Navy that when you cross the equator, and I will mention the fact I am a polyglot, and that's the title given.
Doesn't make you a bad person, John.
Thank you. But there is a ritual you go through when you cross the equator. And if you could just tell us a little bit about
when a polywog becomes a shellback.
Becomes a shellback.
Okay. There's an initiation, and it's all done in fun. But, you know, sometimes people can get carried away in things. So basically, all of the garbage that we was throwing away, allegedly, or going to dispose of it, from the time we left Norfolk to the time we hit the equator, I don't know how many weeks it was, but that was all saved by these very considerate shellback people. In other words, people that had already crossed the equator. So they saved all this garbage, and they proceeded to freeze it. And the day before we were crossing the equator, they brought it out on deck, and it thawed. The
equator very quickly.
Very quickly. And they stuffed it into a large canvas. It was a large canvas, same material the hoses are made out of, and it was sewn together. And it was probably wide enough for somebody to crawl through, you know, maybe 18, 2 feet high tops, 2 by 2 diameter, I guess. And it was about 35, 40 feet long, stuffed with garbage all the way.
Smelly garbage.
Yeah, and that was the initial, and then you crawl through that.
King Neptune is waiting for
and then you have to go to the royal judge first and get sentenced, because if you did something wrong or they thought you did, there was locks, just like the Pilgrims, and they had these long 2.5-inch hoses that they had also been considerate enough to wet thoroughly and stuff them with rags and tie them off and then dry them out in the same sun that defrosted all the garbage, and they became mini billy clubs. So if you were a bad guy and get put in the locks, you got whacked with them, and all along the whole thing, you were on your hands and knees. You could not get up, except if you were put in the locks. And you were getting hit, you know,
oh, yeah,
at various times. So the royal judge sentences you, and then you go to the another station, and then you have to whoever's got the biggest pot belly.
That's King Neptune.
And all the stuff down in the boiler room, all the bilge, that's used to just coat King Neptune. So you got to kiss his belly, and then you've got to move on to the royal barber was another thing we had to go through. And the same bilge with a lot more grease was covered over your head. And then they cut your hair. Their sartorial techniques left a lot to be desired.
You didn't go out on a date right away.
No.
So
and then you were on a little chair, and then there was a pool, a dunking stool, so they just flipped you over, and then they hosed you down when it was all over. But the problem with me is my group had the day watch that day. So they let all the officers and the higher ranking non-coms go first.
So it was pretty messy when you got there.
Well, obviously people couldn't, let's just say they didn't hold their breakfast down when they hit that. It was...
They added to the garbage.
And to the aroma. And I tried to, you know, do the elbow knee crawl, and somebody jumped on my back and everything.
And that cleared that up, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
So now you're a shellback, though.
Yes, I am.
But you had one other interesting story, and we'll touch on it briefly, was the rescue at sea. And you also mentioned that when you got them on board, the rationing that the people in Cuba had.
Yeah. Yeah, there were, a raider picked up 2 small craft, and we went to investigate. And when we got to them, again, we weren't a speed merchant. Our vessel could only do 10, 12 knots, maybe 14 with a wind behind and flank speed. It was a converted Liberty ship,
Right.
the Georgetown. And there was only one boat, and it had a sail. And when we brought it alongside, obviously the people from the first boat had gone on to the second. These were Cubans fleeing Cuba
Refugees,
at that
yeah.
time. And we brought on board 14 from this one. The boat was only like an 18-footer, maybe. And it was leaking.
Oh,
The other
barely
one,
staying
the other one
afloat.
had stunk. They had some water, and they had very little. I mean, they had a side of beef that we just made shark bait. I mean, it was maggoty, and so we brought them on board. We kept them on board for a couple days, but we were in the middle of a mission, so we called the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard came out and met us, and then they took them to, I believe, Miami or Key West. Key
But you
West.
had mentioned that they get, in Cuba, they get,
The rations.
family gets a ration of food that's,
Oh, it was ridiculous. You know, 10, I think 5 or 10 pounds of rice a month, a pound of meat, beef, 1 T-shirt. I mean, these are family. I mean, I have a whole list. I should have brought it in, but it was just minuscule. And the bravery of these people escaping from the oppression that they had was just
yeah, sure, crossing the
just
water
amazing.
like that, an 18-foot boat.
Yeah.
Now, service to the country, you get out, you come back home, you get a job, you raise a family, but there's something there pulling you back to the military. Now that you've served in the military, you join the American Legion to serve those in the military.
Oh, sure.
And we'll do it really quickly. We do want to touch on the Blue Star and what you've done there.
It's not only me. Basically, the Blue Star Family Support Group started at our Woodbridge Township Support the Troops rally down in Veterans Plaza between the library and the health center. And it started in May 2007. There were a couple of speakers. Carol Palmer was one of them. She spoke about, she couldn't get any information about her son who was on his first tour in Iraq during the surge. I'd been over there 8 weeks before she heard from him. So she had formed this this family prayer support group out of her church, which meets last Monday of every month in Avenel Presbyterian Church. And also Kathy Regip spoke, and I had coached Kathy's son Jeff in Colonia soccer, and she spoke about, her son was serving, how proud she was, as we all are. Well, we just felt there was a need there. So after the rally was over, all those with families, it was the Baronies and the Regips and the Palmers and the Spalazzinos, probably forgetting somebody. They were all meeting because they had mutual concerns. And Ed Gorman and I went and I said, how can we help? What can we do?
And there's something the American Legion has established already.
Yes, when I was commander in my first year, we reestablished, the Legion wanted to reestablish the Blue Star program. That started, after World War I, and it was very popular in World War II, a little less, and Korea, less popular in Vietnam, and it sort of faded into the background. But the Legion wanted to bring it into prominence again. So in '05, which I think was my first year when I was commander, the Post 471, T-Nulty Post 471 established that. That's what we decided to do. And when I asked the parents in '07, after the Support the Troops rally, we asked them, what do you need? I said, do you want a place to just meet? And they said, well, that would be good. And so we brought in, the first meeting we had was June 27th, 2007, and we brought in Doug Breen from the Middlesex County Veterans Advisory Council.
Great guy.
And Steve Abel from the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. Now, we only had 5 people there at the first meeting, but that since has grown because of the word of mouth and everything else. And we have come to get involved in a lot of things. But they have a meeting, they have a forum of people who get it, that come the last Tuesday of every month at our post home, and they talk about the needs and concerns of military families and what can we do to help their sons and daughters and husbands and wives that are serving overseas. And it's not just Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, I presented a welcome home box down at Town Hall a week or so ago to Justin Kitchen. He serves on the USS Porter, another Navy guy, and he boards pirate ships off Somalia. And this is not cake duty either.
No.
But the welcome home box that sprung out of the Blue Star Family Support Group, because what we decided to do, it would be great. The family said, well, what happens when my son comes home on leave or daughter comes home on leave? Can we get anything to help them? So we've gone to restaurants and school and restaurants.
It's a great box, yeah.
Yes.
Gas cards, restaurant cards.
Yeah, and the Woodbridge Township shops. Colonia High School, Woodbridge High School, JFK High School, they all finished them off. Yeah. And it's worked out really well.
I can tell you, I've attended, I think, 1 or 2 of the Blue Star meetings. They're amazing to watch. Doug Breen helping the parents just simply get together, they talk. My son's been there, my son hasn't, what's to expect. It's just a great time
the families that have been through the surge, the families that have had 1 or 2 deployments, they still come to the meetings and help the ones that are just recently deploying or about to be deployed. And our website has kicked off the tnltpost471.org, and I just gave it to one of the girls outside. This has 120 links on this website to help veterans past, present, and future. So, I mean, that's what we're here for. We're veterans helping veterans and helping families, and that's what Post 471 does. And that's what I do, and all the members. You're a member. But it stemmed from, being in the Navy, and as I said earlier, when you're all of a sudden and you're in training and you see this Cyrillic alphabet during a Cold War, and you have a top secret crypto clearance, you go, whoa, this is really serious. So now you get you start then. Actually, you start when you take the oath.
Well, as they said, you're taking that oath is what you're doing. You're signing a blank check up to and including your life.
Exactly. And everybody that's ever been in the military does it. And that's what you do. It's your country, and it's your Navy. That's why you do it.
Well, Ron, thank you for your past service. I'm glad you didn't bring up the fact that you made second-class petty officer. I only made 3rd. But thank you for your service to your country. Thank you for continued service to the American Legion, and thank you so much I'm sure all the families thank you for the Blue Star. I'm sure a lot of people.
It's not just me with the Blue Star, it's the families.
But you're an integral part, and every time we talk, you love discussing the Blue Star, which is great. You're a hero. A lot of people think you're a hero, so thank you for stopping by.
Thanks.
This has been John Eberhart with the Veterans Project, and we'll see you again soon.